My name is John Roper. I'm the pastor at Harvey Brown Presbyterian Church, and have had the privilege of having this young woman in my congregation for a number of years before she went off to get smarter than me. And I kind of rushed in today. If somebody would please, there's a man over on 3rd Street in a black pickup, and he's stuck sort of halfway in the parking garage, and he can't figure out how to get in. I was behind him for a while until I realized he wasn't going to figure out how to get in, and so I jumped out. I literally raced right around the corner and was fortunate enough to run into a couple of people, they may be here in the room, that brought me here quickly, so I was thankful for that. I could tell you that Taylor is the director of this group we're in today. She's the associate director for the Academy of Young Preachers. We're very proud of her for that, and that she was at Memorial Church and, oh gosh, where? In Harvard, and director of the church school there, that she was at 4th Presbyterian in Boston and worked there for field ed, that she was a special ed teacher at a public school number 40 in Brooklyn, New York. I just love that. Yeah, she's the woman at 40. And she was involved in Teach America, and for those of us that are Presbyterian, probably the most important thing is she has all sorts of important roles at Montreat, which is our big church center. She's the co-director there, and she's been on planning team since 2008. I could tell you all of that, but none of that is nearly as important as the fact that Taylor, from the time she was in our youth group, from the time that I met her, I had the odd suspicion that she was probably called to ministry, a bit of fearfulness for her that she might be. The other youth always sought her out as the pastor for our youth group. She was the one that got the late night calls, and she was the one that got the consoling when the hearts were broken and when people were disappointed in one another. And Taylor has always come through. She's always been there. And everything she's ever done has had just a sense of excellence about it. And I'm sure there have been many people that have looked at Taylor and said, well, you know, she just got all those gifts, and she got to go to Harvard and all that. But the truth of the matter is that I got up this morning and I shoveled my driveway because I live on a hill. And one of my neighbors came over one day and said, do you have a heated driveway? Your driveway's always clear. Little did she know I was getting up every time it snowed at 5 in the morning and shoveling my driveway and putting salt on it. Well, we look at people like Taylor, and you're going to hear her in a minute, and you're going to say, she just got all those privileges. But the truth of the matter is, she works really hard to make it look easy. And it is a gift. It's a gift of the Spirit. God gives it, and Taylor knows, just like all the rest of us know, doesn't matter how hard you work, if God doesn't give it, you don't get it. But somewhere between the gift of God and the hard work comes an excellent sermon. You're getting ready to hear one. Taylor Lewis Guthrie.
Children of God, let us listen with courage for the word of the Lord as found in the book of Exodus, chapter 20, verses 18 through 21. When all the people witnessed the thunder and lightning, the sound of the trumpet and the mountains smoking, they were afraid and trembled and stood at a distance and said to Moses, you speak to us and we will listen, but do not let God speak to us or we will die. Moses said to the people, do not be afraid, for God has only come to test you and to put the fear of him upon you so that you do not sin. Then the people stood at a distance, while Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
By the end of the year, I thought they could handle it. We had traveled to so many places that they had never been before, and they were fine. They got through it. The place where we stood today shouldn't have shocked them. But still, I could hear their feet begin to drag as we walked closer. The clammy little hands holding mine tightened, and their breath slowed, and a few began to sniffle. So some parents offered to take the nervous ones somewhere else. The tougher students decided that they could handle it on their own. And I was left with the ones on either side of me, the death grip twins, Carson and Abby. And we stood at that entrance, our eyes growing wider and wider. Thunder and lightning pierced the sky, shedding shards of light on their frightened faces, and all they could hear was the sound of the trumpet and their hearts beating just as loud. Nostrils swelled at the smell of smoke, and every sense was heightened. Every sense was on edge. Ahead, a mountain impossible to ascend. And behind, the thick wilderness from whence they came. They could either try to make their way through the dense fog, or they could recoil. So they began to back away. It was easier to do that, to stand at a distance, to draw nearer to whatever they knew before, because this was all too much. God's words echoed in their ears, ringing from their temples to their toes. Not one commandment spoken by the Lord God escaped, not one syllable. God's voice from high upon that mountain dug deep into their minds, and it was hard not to think of a time before. A time when all they knew was commandments. Memories of that life flooded their minds. Images of long days and aching bodies churned their stomachs. Stories of their parents and their grandparents carrying heavy loads reminded the Israelites that this place, this time, was supposed to be the dream of generations back and back and back. The fog that drifted across their faces seemed to mix with their thoughts. It was too hard to decipher what was happening. Was this the promise of freedom? Or was this yet another terrifying life? Because, see, the last time they followed strict rules, it was under Pharaoh's evil and ruthless. Boundaries given meant lives limited. Commands meant a power differential. The leader made rules to keep the followers under his thumb. Commands meant one was in charge and everyone else was not. Forced rules meant there was no conversation. It was the end of a dialogue. It was the end of a journey. The Israelites stood at the base of that smoking mountain in shock. See, this was the God that had promised them freedom, that parted the sea for their escape, that gave them manna from heaven and water from the rock in an unknown land. This was the God of providence, of comfort, of safety, and this, they thought, was the God who chose us, who wanted us, the God who wanted to be in relationship with us. But this was all too much. This couldn't be a God who wanted conversation. And so they stayed there, standing at a distance. Bending down, I looked both of them in the eye and said, "One rule, just explore." Carson gave Abby the sideways eye, and Abby stood there frozen. Holding them by my side, we walked forward into the aquarium. The only light in the hall was coming from the pale glow of the walls. Electric jellyfish floated by, tentacles swirling slowly in the water, and we came to the middle of the room where the moon jellies and the flower hat jellies, the sea nettles, and creatures strange and small drifted along, and I pulled out my camera to take a few shots at this amazing sight, and Abby and Carson took it as a chance to back away and recoil from that terrifying wall. And I grabbed their hands, and we kept walking. I ignored their whispers. "Can we go? Let's go outside. I'm cold. I want to go see the otters again." And the room grew darker as we went deeper down the hall. It can take a while to see in the thick darkness. One has to trust instinct and other senses until the eyes adjust. After walking through tunnel after tunnel of clouds, he got to the top. And he gingerly tried to sit. Smoke still stung his eyes, and he felt around. He found a smooth rock, and he straightened his cloak. And he squinted, trying to catch a glimpse of his host, the one who invited him into the cloud, who called him up a mountain on the brink. Meeting God in the fire, in the thunder, in the darkness, this was normal for Moses. But yet, that did not calm Moses. This was terrifying. Let us not equate Moses' courage for walking into the darkness with a courage that squelches fear. No thick darkness, no matter how many times Moses has seen it and will see it, it is still the unknown. And the unknown is enough to cause someone to tremble, tremble, tremble. But yet, the trembling Moses is there in the darkness, ready to be with the God who called him and invited him. In the story of Jesus calling the first disciples, those fishermen brothers, Simon, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, the Gospel of Matthew proclaims this: immediately they left their nets, their boat, their father, and followed him. Immediately. There was no pro-con list, no consulting with a cast of characters, no weighing of options. They just accepted the invitation and followed Christ. And I want to believe that they left without hesitation. The use of the word immediately implies that. But what happened about 20 minutes later? down the road when they realize that they've left all their clothes at home, or that they forgot to pack lunch, or that they had no idea when they'd be back, or if they'd be back, or where this journey would take them, or really who this man was. What happened then? Did they tremble? Did they begin to fear this journey? They kept walking, but now they trembled with every step, terrified at the nearness of God incarnate, of being in that thick darkness and having no idea what to expect next. They kept walking. And the questions continued. Why do we have to go? The only way to get them to stay in that eerily lit room, was to block the entrance. Now, I know it was probably not the nicest move I made as a teacher, but I wanted them to explore what lurked in the foggy waters. We found this little alcove created by walls of glass, and I told Carson and Abby to just go in there and look at the jellyfish. Their little eyes squeezed shut, their faces tensed, and their teeth were gritting. And they stood with their backs to the water-filled walls and faced me, my 5-foot-tall frame, trying to block any outside light and the exit. "Turn around," I said. "You'll be fine." Hesitantly, their eyes began to open. "Now walk closer." Abby screamed. "It's okay, sweetie." "But they're swimming at me." And the glass was so clean, and the jellyfish were so close, the room seemed engulfed by sheer beasts of the sea. "Give me your hands." And before they could offer, I grabbed their hands and placed them on the glass. More screams, loud screams. People began to look, and I held their hands there until the jellyfish passed, tentacles gliding gracefully by. Squeals. Smiles. Carson and Abby turned and took their other hands out of their pockets and placed them decisively on the walls, nose pressed hard against the glass and mouths agape. The two once terrified darlings stood mesmerized by the beauty of what they might not have ever known. Each time a jellyfish rolled its slimy body by, Carson and Abby would shake their bodies to and fro, thrilled at the mystery unfolding before them. I let them stay in there a long time until we finally had to go. And reluctantly, the transformed duo began to leave. And Carson turned to Abby and said, "Did you see how they lit up from the inside?" Yeah, and then sometimes only some of the little stringy things would move. It went on like this until we found the others, and words spilled out of their mouths like flowing water. Each detail of the up and close personal encounter with these creatures came to life as Carson and Abby shared their findings with the classmates. The whole class was aflurry. Questions about oceans and animals and predators and prey and bones and skin and brains and seaweed, and everything was asked. And the chatter did not end until dismissal 3 hours later. And then the next morning, they all came in wanting to read about oceans and jellyfish because they were not finished with the conversation. The commandments were just the beginning of the relationship. God invited the people that day at Mount Sinai to be with God, to be intricately woven into a conversation that has lasted for generations back and back and back and will never be finished. Like Moses, like the earliest disciples, we are invited to take a risk and enter the thick darkness, to jump off the boat and go. Go be in relationship with the one who constantly, without hesitation, invites us. This is the living God's invitation. Don't just draw near to the thick darkness and peek in. Stay. Get comfortable. Take off your shoes and dwell on that holy ground. Come and let your eyes adjust. Allow the mystery to slowly unfold before you. Come and begin to see a new thing set just for you. Come and listen to the sound of the lightning and the thunder and God's presence. Come and be with God in the darkness. Come and be in relationship with the one who invited you into the dense fog so that you could learn and you could dwell and you could listen and you could grow. Friends, let us draw near to that thick darkness and stay a while. But then, let us draw out and leave. There are people at the bottom of the mountain, still trembling and standing at a distance.